Susan, thank you for joining us. Been looking forward to this session for some time since we spoke about it firstly before Christmas. It's been good. So just so you know, last week we had a couple of sessions with everybody just talking about what they're doing currently, if they're doing anything. And it was interesting to go through people's different experiences, right? Because obviously there's sort of the strength sessions that you do and other sports physiologists do. But then we've got people who've done yoga before. We've got a couple of the guys in Victoria do weekly Pilates. And then there's other cross training going on, people cycling, all sorts of stuff. So it's a really interesting topic, I think, because obviously, and it's a lot of the people here are already seeing you or seeing somebody else, but people's experience is mixed. Like I've done strength sessions before and it ended up injuring myself, which wasn't the best idea, and I probably should have been going to see somebody like you rather than try and figure it out myself or follow the instruction from a coach, which is why I typically have steered away from getting involved directly with helping the people that I'm coaching with strength training, because I'm far from an expert, as you can see from my own experience, and I have got injured where I followed coaches' instructions, which wasn't a good thing. So I've much preferred to steer people in the direction of getting expert advice elsewhere to help them. That given, I think it's really important subject to discuss in terms of, number one, what are the benefits and why do it, and how often you should do it, and what's the best thing to be doing, and it's a really open sort of area.
Absolutely.
And I've got a lot to learn, and I know a number of the guys here come and see you already, but for some people that's not possible because they live too far away, and not that I live too far away, but Maylands is still a bit of a hike, and I know Lou manages to get all the way from Secret Harbour to come and see you, so I've got absolutely no excuse at all, really. But yeah, so it'd be great to sort of get your opinion on all of that. And firstly, I'd really maybe just talk about why do it. Should everybody be doing strength training, and what are the benefits? And I sort of see the prime reason I would do it would be to stop myself getting injured, which would be a good thing. But I'd also be interested to hear whether there are any direct performance benefits also. So over to you.
All right, cool. Well, it's really good that you said all of those things, because I have actually put a little presentation together, so I can appeal to everyone's different learning styles, hopefully. So I'm just going to do my share screen, if that's okay. While Rob is working that out, I'll introduce myself really quickly. Quite a few of you on here know who I am already. My name's Susan Grober. I'm a physiotherapist and an exercise scientist. I run my own little clinic called the Long Run Physio and Fitness out of the back of the Tribe and Trail store down in Maylands. Been up and running for just over a year now, and for those of you who have come to see me and work out with me on a regular basis, thank you for doing that. But I'm sure if you have already had my lectures on how important strength training is, and quite a few of you have already reap the benefits of doing regular strength training as well. I am ultra runner, trail runner, marathon runner myself. I started my running journey back in 2010 or so. And I've done multiple road marathons, multiple ultras. Longest distance I've done today is a 50 miler. I hope to get my second one in this year, and then hoping to carry that on over the course of the next couple of years. So I understand the physicality of it, the mentality of it. I'm around it all the time, 24/7 practically. Being you know, sitting next to the ultra series crew as well, and yeah, it seeps into your soul. Okay.
You should be right now, Susan.
Okay, let me have a look. Yay, there you go.
I had to Google it.
Thank God for Google. All right, let's start at the top. Now, how do I get this thing working again? Oh, why is it I actually have to use a slide? Right, play, there we go, play slideshow. All right, so like I said, that's me. Let's work through it. Okay, so strength training, resistance training, as Rob mentioned at the beginning, it means different things to different people. Everyone has a very varied experience in what they've done previously. Depending on what you've done, it may have looked like being in the gym and using some of those machines. You may have done seen powerlifting, seen Olympic lifting. That's what got me interested in lifting heavy things when I was a kid. My two favorite sports watching the Olympics were always the Ollie lifting and the marathon, so go figure. Pilates, body weight training, plyometrics, you know, jumping up and down, yoga, hill repeats, kettlebells, bands, you name it. It's all the same thing. You can use different terms for it, as long as the purpose of what you're trying to do is increase your muscular strength. Then you can call it strength training or resistance training. The effects of which, or the benefit of which, to what it is that you're doing vary considerably, though. So let's have a look at that. Back in the 80s and 90s, the opinion around strength training, especially in terms of research, it was very varied. Originally, it was thought that, from a research perspective, that there really wasn't much benefit to giving time over to doing strength training for endurance athletes. Original studies kind of showed this idea that there was a confounding or interference phenomenon, which kind of inhibited the ability of either strength training or endurance training when they were done concurrently. So if you did a lot of strength training and you kind of inhibited your ability to develop your endurance training, or if you did a lot of strength or endurance training, it kind of inhibited your ability to build strength. So for the latter part of the last 30, 40 years, most people have, if you say runner, I'm a marathon runner, I'm an endurance runner, and you said strength training, they say, why? What's the benefit to me? Science has now moved on from that. We have found that obviously the researching variables that they were using at the time weren't probably the best research structures to be using. And now we know that there are considerable benefits to be had from strength training if done in the right way. So let's have a look into doing that. Most of the belief systems around that strength training for a lot of people are still a little skew-if, especially I know for endurance athletes. As soon as you start thinking about lifting heavy things, they start thinking about increasing muscle mass. Increasing muscle mass is believed to affect your VO2 max, which it does to affect, because your VO2 is actually based on your body mass, as well as some other variables, which I'll go into in a minute. And if you're affecting your body mass, then that will slow you down, though, surely, right? So nobody wants to be heavy and slow. That would suck, but does it? First of all, what the hell is VO2 max? It gets thrown around a lot. Everyone sees it on their Garmins. They're all going, oh, look, my VO2 max has gone up or down or sideways. Sometimes it happens quite frequently. Sometimes it happens quite often. But here's what I'm here to tell you. Those algorithms that your Garmin is using are not overly reliable. It's done on sub-maximal efforts, which is not as accurate as if you were in a lab running through an actual VO2 max test. So VO2 is really the optimal rate at which your heart, your lungs, your muscles can efficiently use and utilize oxygen during exercise. Okay, so it's direct measurement of your aerobic capacity. So everyone's aerobic capacity is completely individual. Yes, your mass has a lot to do with it, and it does improve as you lose weight. However, your absolute optimized VO2 max is completely, totally, and utterly determined by your genes. So unless you can actually go back in time, there's only so much you can actually do with optimizing your VO2 max. Okay, so a nice example of that is someone like Kilian Jornet. He actually has a lab measured VO2 max of somewhere around the 90 mark. If you looked at your own Garmin VO2 estimate, even though it's submaximal, it might be somewhere in the realm of truth. It's probably sitting somewhere between 30 something odd and 50 something odd. Okay, so that's the kind of athlete he is compared to the rest of us mere mortals. So in terms of being able to actually have an aerobic capacity and at the scale of what he does, for the vast majority of us, it's never going to happen. Sorry. Okay. So why isn't this important? When we look at muscles themselves, I'm going to give you a little bit of a physiology lecture here as well. Okay, so I think it's really important to understand, first of all, how your body works, how strength training works with your body, and how that then turns into the benefits that you want in terms of optimizing your training. So your muscles are made up of these bundles, which are made up of fibers, and the muscles themselves, these fibers, go through this process called contraction. Either they shorten or they lengthen. So you get a concentric contraction or you get an eccentric contraction when they lengthen. All right, so this occurs by a process called the sliding filament theory. So this little bit down, where's my little pointer thingy? No, it's not working. Okay, so the little picture at the bottom of the screen, it says sliding filament theory, a sarcomere is relaxed above and contracted below. That's basically the unit of a muscle fiber that moves. Okay, so you've got this filament that literally slides or contracts and lengthens for a muscle contraction. And then you have the cross-bridge cycle, because the filament itself is actually made up of these little things called actin and myosin. So they couple and decouple in order to propel the muscle fibers or these filaments from sliding over the top of each other. So in terms of muscles themselves, they're made up of different muscle fiber types. I'm sure you've all heard of what these are before. You've got your fast twitch and your slow twitch. Okay, so your type 1 are your oxidative or slow twitch fibers. They're the ones that actually utilize oxygen in order to actually contract. Then you've got your type 2As, which are oxidative or glycolytic, which means that they don't actually need oxygen to contract. And then you've got your type 2X or B, and they're the anaerobic type of fibers. All right, so your fast twitch fibers, they will produce an awful lot amount of force and speed, but they don't last very long because of that lactate buildup that occurs in the muscle when you have an anaerobic contraction. Okay, so typically a sprinter will run for 10 seconds, or you might get a 200-meter runner or 200-meter runner that will run in 20 seconds. 400-meter runner will take less than a minute. Basically, that's an anaerobic exercise. Anything beyond a minute, you will start requiring your aerobic muscle fibers to actually take you through the rest of that exercise, okay? So you need oxygen in that scenario. Okay. So for us endurance runners, it means that our dominant fiber type is oxidative or type 1 fibers. So they're slow, their force is relatively small, they're resistant to fatigue, yeah, they have a low glycogen content, very rich in capillaries, Capillary supply, blood supply really feeds back into this VO2 concept as well. Myoglobin, okay, myoglobin is like hemoglobin in that it has an affiliation for oxygen, but unlike hemoglobin, its job is to actually store oxygen in the muscles. They're quite dark in color. Lots of mitochondria. Mitochondria are little powerhouses, little factories inside your cells that actually create energy. And then there's some other fun stuff in there. You can go and look all this up on Wikipedia if you want. All of that information is there. Then next to your muscles, the second most important thing is your tendons. So tendons are these high tensile, dense, fibrous connective tissue thingies that are attached to our muscles. So their primary purpose is to actually transmit force to the bones. So as a muscle contracts, the force that is stored in the muscle is translated across that tendon. The tendon pulls on the bone and we move. That's basically how it works. So we get a nervous stimulus. We tell our muscles what to do. The muscle contracts, the tendon translates force, and we have movement as the bones and joints move. Tendons are often thought of these days as actually having quite a spring function as well. One of my lecturers at uni by the name of Dr. James Debenham is one of the world's leading experts in spring function theory in terms of the tendon's role in spring function. So if we think of muscles and tendons in particular as having like a spring-like effect in terms of this force translation, they become a really important part of understanding how propulsion occurs, but also how injuries occur as well. So if we have muscles that are contracting, we're overloading them, they start breaking down, they can't really keep up with what it is that we want them to do. The tendons then, in order to supplement what the muscles don't have the capacity to do, will start taking over some of their job. They're not designed to do that. So tendons respond to, They respond to stimulus. So the more we work them, the harder they work, the more they break down, the more they repair. But the more they repair, the stronger they get. However, if we don't give them the capacity to actually repair, then they continue to, the rate of breakdown exceeds the rate of repair, and then we end up with stupid things like tendinopathies. Okay, I'm sure we've all had it. I'm sure most of us have friends who have had them. Tendinopathies, plantar fasciitis, hamstring tendinopathies, you name it. Patella tendinopathies, we've all had them, or we know someone who has. Okay, so there is also a relationship then between strong muscles and strong tendons. They stress bone. Stressing bone leads to bone maintenance, which is maintenance then of bone density. And why the hell are bones important? Okay. As we age, our bone density does actually start decreasing. There's no avoiding it, unfortunately. For women and boys, we reach 90% of our peak bone density around the age of 18. For boys, it's about 20. It does generally continue to increase up to about as much as it'll ever get by the time we hit our late 20s. And then from about 30, the loss of bone increases beyond the rate of bone storage. Okay, so by the time we hit our 40s, we actually start, you can see that graph there, we actually start dipping off in that curve in terms of bone mass. Okay, so for women, that becomes a really important factor. The average age of men and women who participate in ultramarathons is roughly mid-40s. For guys, it's generally around 45. For women, it's about 43. So this is 100-mile plus. Okay, so we have more money, we have more time, we have more freedom, and we have literally the ability to participate in a way that younger populations don't tend to. So if we don't have healthy muscles and healthy tendons, likelihood is we don't have healthy bones, and that leads to increased fracture risks then as we get older. Okay, so osteoporosis is one of those things that we've all heard of. We probably know someone who has it. We know people even within the running community who have been diagnosed with osteopenia, which is the precursor to osteoporosis. Okay, it basically is this rate of which that you start losing bone density to the point that your bones become porous and brittle. Okay, risk factors include being over 60, being female. Sorry, but guys, you're not out of the hunt either. Over 75, your risk is just as high as women's. Having or being underweight, so having a BMI of less than 16, and that is regardless of your height. It really is that important. Losing height, losing about 4 centimeters in height is also a diagnostic factor in terms of identifying osteoporosis. Having a family history of it, if you've got a mum or an aunt or a father or anyone else in your grandmother who's had osteoporosis, likelihood is you're at much greater risk as well. Having an autoimmune disease, particularly with the use of glucocorticoid steroids for periods of longer than 3 months, also decreases bone density. Having illnesses or comorbidities such as CPOD, which is a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, what used to be called emphysema back in the day. Thyroid, parathyroid disorders, low testosterone, you can see all of the risk factors there, okay? Prolonged immobility, all of the things. I know we all like a drink as well, but also having more than 3 units of alcohol per day is deemed excessive, and also being a smoker increases your risks as well. All right, so I just mentioned that being an average mile runner, there was a massive survey that happened back in 2011. At that stage, the greatest rate of participation at 100 miles was happening in the US. So, but this actually did cross US, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, I believe, as well. So that was a really good cross-sectional study of who was actually doing, what was it called? 100-mile ultras back then. A further study went on to find out exactly how many of those people were actually including resistance training, and it was less than 50%. But obviously the most important reason as to why people were opting out of doing any resistance training or strength training was the fact that they just didn't know where to start. Either they'd never done it or they didn't know why they needed to do it. Okay, so the main reason we're all here, 5 benefits of strength training. Strength training, regular strength training does improve your running economy. It improves your time to exhaustion at maximal aerobic speed. Okay, so if you're really pushing your threshold for a long time, the point to exhaustion does actually improve. Your rate of force development and power. So what you're thinking about your ability to actually run uphill, jump over logs, okay, rock hop, you name it, okay, you need force to be able to do those things, and your ability to do that improves as your strength improves. Time trial performances. Now, one of my, what's it called, peers and mentors, Dr. Kate Baldwin, in her study, she found that just trial performances in 5Ks improved as much as 5% in her strength training group as opposed to her non-strength training triathlon training group. Which for her, it was actually showed a statistical significance, which is why, and that has also been replicated in other studies as well. So instead of paying $300 for a pair of, Nike Flies that give you a 4% improvement, just go hit the gym and lift them heavy shit and you'll get 5% for free, okay? Anaerobic parameters as well, your sprint speeds also improve because you have that ability to actually produce force, you have that improved strength, you have that improved reflexes, you name it. So there are more studies that show that improved strength also improves balance as well as coordination, which are some of the things that we do lose as we age as well. Okay, and all of that comes down to how well we maintain our muscle mass, muscle strength, bone density, tendon strength, everything. Okay, so there are some of the other physiological performances effects that occur with regular strength training as well. So does it affect or improve your VO2? No. Does it improve your economy? It sure as hell does. Improves your anaerobic capacity, lactate threshold, reduces delayed fatigue, maximal strength, rate of force development. Look, it's all there, okay? I'm sure you can all read it right now. So what does it all look like? Okay. one of the other main capacities that it does improve is actually reducing your risk of injury. Okay, so regular strength training can reduce your rate of injury by up to 51%. Okay, so as we get older, or even the more we train, excessive load on your tissues, modifying training frequency, intensity, the whole lot, it just, it leads to greater tissue capacity, which reduces your risk and rate of injury. Okay, the stronger you are, the less likely you are to actually injure yourself. Now, anyone who's had chronic ankle instability before and has actually put the work into improving their strength knows just how important that is. Anyone who's ever had any kind of tendinopathy knows how important that is, okay? Especially if you've been to see me. So, strength training as an aging endurance athlete. As we age, some of the confounding factors, this is, it's just a part of aging, unfortunately, is we do have decreased muscle mass, okay? We know now that there is a relationship between muscle mass and VO2 max as well. As we lose muscle mass with age, not necessarily gaining muscle mass, but as we lose it, it does affect our VO2 max, because as the muscle bulk decreases, our ability to uptake oxygen also decreases. Okay, the two go hand in hand. And muscle loss in older adults is called sarcopenia. Starts north of 40, rapidly accelerates after 70 without intervention. Okay, because you can actually lose up to, 40 to 80% of your muscle mass between the ages of 40 and 80. Okay, so that then has a knock-on effect. If you have decreased muscle mass, it leads to less stress on your bone, which leads to decreased bone density, which means that you have a greater risk of being more frail as you get older, which leads to increased risk of falling, fractures, and other comorbidities as well. So muscle mass in and of itself is actually really protective. Not only does it decrease your rate of injury as you age, it also decreases your risk of comorbidities as you age as well. So by comorbidities, I mean obesity, obesity, morbid obesity, which is a metabolic disease, diabetes, heart disease. Okay, so it literally protects you against all of these things. Okay, so what is it that we do? I lift heavy things. The girls will tell you, some of the guys will too. We lift heavy things because that's where the research has actually taken us. Once upon a time, if you walked into a gym, your PT or whoever would give you 15 to 25 reps of everything, isolated muscle exercises, maybe a bit of leg strength focus with, the leg press, or, what is it, quad extension, hamstring thingy. No, we don't do that. We do compound exercises. Compound exercises just mean exercises that are using multiple muscles and multiple joints. So some of my favorites are things like deadlifts and squats with a bell bar or barbell with heavy weights on them. Now, I don't get everybody lifting heavy stuff really, really quickly. What we do is we actually graduate you into lifting heavier and heavier load, because first of all, if you've never done it before, it can be really intimidating. But B, it also makes you quite sore in that first few weeks if you don't do it properly. And B, C, I know I'm losing track of where I'm up to here. But if you try to lift too heavily too quickly, you do increase your risk of injury. So like Rob, you're experienced, you were following your coach's instructions, you lifted something that you shouldn't have, you ended up injured. Probably you were lifting beyond your capacity with a poor technique as well. So that's why I started running strength training classes, where I have people come in, I take their injury history, their strength training history, I assess their manual strength, their joint range, and then I give them bespoke training programs and strength training programs. Now, people can actually go away and do their own thing, or they can come and work out with me within my groups where I can keep an eye on them and help them, coach them through their techniques until they get to the point where they feel comfortable and want to go off and do it themselves. If you want to do that, it's totally cool. If you feel like you're capable of doing it by yourself, I'm happy for you to do that. But I do offer one-on-one coaching sessions as well for people who would prefer to have a little bit of one-on-one time with me so that I can manage what it is that they're doing. Or if they're really feeling like they're not on top of what they're doing, they're like, oh, deadlifts are hurting my back. I'm like, well, come in, let me have a look at what you're doing. Yeah, so that's where we're up to. All right, so heavy stuff. By heavy stuff, what I mean, if you were originally in that kind of 15 to 25 rep range, we've now moved that much, much further south. Literally between our absolute maximal lifting capacity, which is what we call 1 rep max. Okay, that is your absolute lifting capacity to failure. Between there and basically about 5 to 6 reps. Okay, so it's low reps, high load. And the more you can do of that, the better. And by the more than that, I mean, it's literally 2 to 3 sessions a week. That's it. If you can get 1 session in a week, fantastic. If you can get 2 sessions in a week, fantastic. It's even better because you can actually make really solid progress over a shorter period of time by having 2 dedicated strength training sessions a week as opposed to just 1. 3 in your off season or when you're actually at low volume in terms of running, also amazing. Especially for anyone who's never strength trained before or is trying to improve their running volume. 3 sessions of strength training a week can help you get there more quickly because you will have a much better improvement in your muscular and tendon capacity to take that heavier load. Okay, I just need to drink water. I'll talk myself dry. So those really are the 2 takeaways from that. Yes, you get all of those wonderful improvements in your running economy, your ability to run to fatigue, reduce risk of injury, improve muscular strength, force development, bone strength, reduced injury risk. Yes, compound movements. Like I said, multi-joint, multiple muscles, the more load you put through all of these things, the better. Like, what was I going to say? Every now and then, actually a few months ago, we actually did a little bit of planking in class for shits and giggles. I know that went down a treat by the whole team. They all loved that, didn't you? Yeah, I can see Linda laughing. Yeah, no. While everyone thinks that this idea that core strength is something that you have to do lots of sit-ups, you have to do lots of planking. No, studies have actually shown that back squatting can improve your core strength better and faster and actually have better core strength than any of those individualized exercises. Okay, so if you want a strong core, lift heavy shit. There you go. All right, I think that's pretty much it. Now, does anybody have any questions? Because I've probably forgotten almost half of the stuff that I wanted to say, but okay. There you go. Right.
Thanks, Susan.
No worries.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Great background. Yeah, so I just have one personal question where I've had multiple shoulder surgeries and I can't lift heavy shit. So what would you suggest?
There is always workarounds. Multiple shoulder injuries is not a barrier to lifting heavy shit. It just means that you need to do the heavy lifting in order, well, not the heavy lifting, but you need to do appropriate rehab for your shoulder in order to get you back to a place where you can start lifting heavy again. So for everyone, it's very individualized, which is why it's so important that you do actually talk to a professional, either a physiologist or a physiotherapist. Who knows what they're talking about in terms of rehab. Okay, so I recently had a client come in and he was borderline needing a total shoulder reconstruction, and about 3 months in from doing regular strength training with me and seeing an exercise physiologist for his shoulder, even though I could have told him what to do, and I did, but whatever, he needed another opinion. He's now decided to park having that shoulder recon completely because the shoulder is no longer bothering him and in any of the ways that it did previously. So there's a direct relationship between joint health also, and I forgot to mention that, and muscular strength as well.
Right. Okay, who's got a question? Please unmute and shoot.
Hi, Susan.
Hey, Peter.
So, you know, I come and do your sessions like once a week with the heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And then throughout the rest of the week, at the moment, I'm doing like more body weight stuff, and they're shorter mini sessions. Like, how beneficial are they compared to, you know, swapping that out and doing an extra heavy session instead or something like that?
Anything is better than nothing. I would prefer people start with body weight stuff than do nothing at all, especially if they don't have the access or resources to do it. Or if you are really time poor, then by all means keep doing it. But if you really want to optimize that strength training, then there is no comparison to doing 2 heavy strength sessions per week versus 1 and some body weight stuff. Okay.
Cool. Who's next?
I've got one, but it's not for me, Susan. It's for Rachel.
Okay.
She put it on the page tonight. She said she's looking forward to the recording. Interested in strength exercises for increasing foot strength and ligaments, etc., that support the foot.
Okay. So
I'll just give a bit of history there. Rachel thinks she's got plantar at the moment.
Okay. First of all, get assessed by a professional. Okay, so it's really hard to give out advice when I don't know the ins and outs of everything that's going on. We're all very good at diagnosing, thanks to Dr. Google and, you know, our best friends' experiences. Realistically, what we do know about PF, if that's what it is, plantar fasciitis, or plantar fasciopathy, as we like to think of it now. The plantar fascia is this big band of fascial ligament, big band of fascial tissue from the base of the calcaneus, which is one of the tarsal bones in the foot, to the base of the toes. We think of it now as an extension of our Achilles tendon. So if you remember what I said a little bit earlier about muscle capacity and tendon load, in terms of muscle capacity being exceeded and tendons having to take over the job of the muscle in terms of when we start loading them. If the muscles don't have the strength around the calf, which are, you've got 2 muscles really that are attached to your Achilles tendon, which is your gastrocnemius and your soleus. Okay, it's the deep muscle, is the big bad boy deep to the gastrocs that do most of the loading. For us as runners, it takes up to 6.5 times our body weight when we run. If they don't have the strength and capacity, the tendon has to take the load. The tendon gets tight, it pulls on the calcaneus, which pulls on the plantar fascia, where we start getting those symptoms. So in order to actually improve that, it's not necessarily ankle strength so much, it's actually improving the muscular capacity of those muscles that will help alleviate the symptoms of plantar fasciitis or plantar fasciopathy. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So what I see, all sorts of injuries people have while running, obviously, but the 2 that keep coming up, so plantar's one.
Yeah.
And the second one that I see all the time are stress fractures.
Yes.
What do we do about stress fractures? Or how do we prevent them?
How do we prevent them? All right. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. I'm actually going to a presentation in a couple of weeks that talks about RED-S, which is Reduced Energy Deficit Syndrome. It's more often seen in endurance females, but it doesn't mean that boys aren't subject to it either. So stress fractures. Okay, so it's a loading error. So we're asking our bodies to do more than what they have the capacity to do. It's insufficient nutrients. So we're not getting enough nutrients, either calcium or vitamin D or both, in order to keep our bones healthy. Or we just have a genetic disposition to it, which is kind of sucks. or what's the other word I was looking for? Other risk factors include low body weights. All right, so all of those things that I talked about in terms of risk factors for osteoporosis, basically dump all of that under risk factors for stress fractures as well. So you can decrease your risk of developing a stress fracture by managing your load, not as in managing load as in not spiking in terms of adding lots of volume to your running load really, really quickly. Making sure that you have muscles and tendons that have the capacity to take the load. Making sure that you're getting adequate nutrition as well. A lot of us obsess about weight as well as endurance athletes. But if you're actually withholding calories because you have on some false premise that you're overweight and you need to lose weight, and if you don't, it's gonna slow you down. Okay, just get stronger first. Okay, then you can worry about your weight. And if you're really worried and have really no idea what it is that you're doing in terms of nutrition, go and talk to a professional. There's a very real reason why we have sports dietitians and sports nutritionists out there. In management of stress fractures, I'd still go and see a sports dietitian because they're also allied health professionals. They're degree qualified. But those are probably the most important factors in terms of reducing your risk in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody else?
And then you get weirdos like Felix, who just has this genetic condition where he doesn't absorb vitamin D well. So in the absence of vitamin D, you can't store calcium, and you end up with silly things like neck of femur stress fractures. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
All right. Does anybody else have another question? No? Okay. All right. So when we were talking before Christmas, we were just talking about how people engage with you. And the one thing that struck me was actually, if you've got private health insurance, how affordable it was. So do you want to just talk people through that?
Yep, sure thing. So I have actually changed things up a little bit for the new year because I realized I made some mistakes last year in how I was structuring what I was doing. So I pretty much, because I'm a registered accredited physiotherapist, everything I do is what's it called? Claimable on your private health if you happen to have it. Obviously, rebates vary depending on what your cover's like. So at the moment, I'm doing, or what I offer is one-on-one strength sessions and coaching. I've pushed them out to about an hour and 15 because realistically, that's kind of how long it takes us to go through a full history, full assessment, and then bring you through an entire gym routine. And they're $140 at the moment. Then I offer one-on-one 45-minute gym catch-ups as well, where we can revise your program and change up what it is that we're doing. And those are $100. And also then there's the strength training group sessions as well, and they're $35 per session. Now, I will add to that, because Rob and people like, who else is in there? Glenn and who else have we got? Beck Heffernan and Wayne are all Ultra Series coaches. I offer 10% off of all of my services to any of their coached athletes. Okay. So you can, everything I do is 10% off. For the group sessions as well, I also do 10 backs and I give another 10% off of that. So instead of being $35, it works out at about $28 per session. And obviously it's claimable on your private health as well.
That's fantastic. That's really good background, I think. And it's sort of background that we need to be able to make decisions on this stuff rather than just sort of guessing and Googling.
Exactly. Yeah. Dr. Google's always everyone's best friend until you break something.